Imagine waking up right now, walking into the kitchen, looking at your partner across the breakfast table, and literally every single unfiltered thought just falls right out of your mouth. No polite morning greetings, no mental filters, just immediate, sharp reality hitting the air the absolute second it crosses your mind.
So you're getting ready for work, right? And they ask you this simple, everyday question. Normally, you just nod, smile, and tell them they look great. But in this reality, you feel this internal panic. You desperately want to offer that polite reassurance, but your brain physically forces out the raw truth instead. That little protective lie that keeps a fragile moment intact, it's completely gone, and you just cannot stop what comes next.
Yeah, yikes. No, you look insecure, your posture is terrible, and this question isn't really about your outfit. That is the brutal, naked reality of a world where lying is physically impossible. A world where every passing thought turns into a sharp, clean sentence. Think about how many times a day we rely on those sweet little lies just to keep the peace. In this explainer, we're going to look at a scenario with zero masks, no comforting fictions, just truth. Always truth.
Section 1. The Mirage of Paradise. At first glance, mandatory honesty sounds like the ultimate human utopia, doesn't it? I mean, for centuries, we've practically begged for a world built entirely on truth. And sure, for the first few hours, we'd celebrate a literal miracle. We're talking the absolute end of political corruption, fake love, and financial manipulation. Scams? Completely gone. But that initial euphoria would fade incredibly fast. We'd realize the horrifying trade-off. Losing the ability to lie also means the total end of emotional boundaries and comforting illusions. Every conversation becomes hyper-efficient, but also deeply unimaginably dangerous.
Which brings us to Section 2. The collapse of politeness.
What's truly wild here is how quickly our everyday social survival tools would just vanish into thin air. Take this harmless little phrase. You walk into work after a completely disastrous morning. You spilled your coffee, fought with your spouse, your car is making that weird clanking noise, and Dave in accounting asks how you are. You say, "I'm fine." It's a shield. But in a world of absolute truth, that shield evaporates. You can no longer protect your own fragility, or Dave's for that matter, from the overwhelming weight of your actual reality.
And this reveals a massive, absolutely crucial insight. Truth is not the same thing as kindness. You'd have to tell your spouse every single fleeting, hidden frustration. Families would rapidly shift from being emotional shelters into terrifying truth labs. Just imagine the absolute war zone a standard holiday dinner would become. Without the little social tools we've used for thousands of years to soften the blow, every social interaction is basically a direct hit to the nervous system.
Let's zoom out to Section 3. Institutions under fire.
Okay, let's look at the macro level and see how this scales across society, because governments and corporations rely entirely on strategic communication and curated images. Suddenly, courtrooms and brands built on undeniable quality, massive winners. False witnesses disappear completely, and genuine products absolutely thrive. But on the flip side, luxury marketing based on aspiration or politicians relying on clever spin, instant losers. The gap between current reality and a promised future just shrinks to zero. If a brand is just selling the illusion of status, they would literally evaporate overnight.
Picture this: unscriptable press conferences where leaders are physically forced to admit their actual motives, or corporations having to mandate the disclosure of every single product flaw right there on the packaging. And think about international relations. Bluffing becomes completely impossible. Transparency doesn't actually guarantee peace. In fact, a leader saying exactly what they think about a rival's military weakness leaves absolutely no room for tact. The world gets so much harder to govern because truth reveals weakness way faster than power can hide it.
Moving on to Section 4. The casualties of intimacy.
This brings us to a crucial point about our personal lives. We think we want pure honesty from others, but we vastly underestimate how much it would devastate our closest bonds. Just imagine sitting down for a first date. You're nervous, you take a sip of water, and instead of polite small talk, you hear this fall out of your date's mouth. "I like your face more than your personality so far." Ouch, right? There's zero pretending, no polite, gradual buildup of attraction. Just immediate, awkward, pure exposure.
Or how about, "I am mostly here because I am lonely"? Real love would become incredibly deep for the very few relationships that somehow survive this crucible. But all that innocent mystery that helps attraction grow in the first place, entirely gone. Ask yourself, could your ego actually survive knowing exactly where you stand with everyone every single second of the day? Without those little fire extinguishers of selective silence that we keep in our mouths, emotional boundaries just break down entirely. Generations of unspoken tension, long-held secrets,
hidden resentments, they all spill out the second the family sits down to eat. Imagine a world where a teacher is forced to reveal genuine disappointment to a struggling student, crushing their spirit, simply because they couldn't hold back a momentary thought. It's a lot to process.
Which leads perfectly into Section 5, the chaos of consciousness. Here is where this explainer gets truly wild. Humans are fundamentally not built to process every passing thought as actual speech. We aren't robots processing ones and zeros. A momentary shadow of emotion, what psychologists might call emotional weather, would be spoken out loud and immediately heard as a spoken certainty. If every jealous, confused, or fearful thought escaped your lips, it would reveal just how chaotic human consciousness really is. A fleeting, cruel thought that you don't even truly agree with gets mistaken for a deep, defining belief by the person hearing it. We'd completely lose the comfort of ambiguity.
And finally, Section 6, wisdom beyond the truth.
Ultimately, this entire thought experiment forces us to completely reevaluate what we actually value as a society. Because simply speaking, factual accuracy isn't the ultimate goal of human interaction, is it? We'd quickly discover that truth is incredibly powerful, but on its own, it's incomplete. Without empathy, without timing, and without humility, truth can wound a whole lot more deeply than lies ever could. We would have to learn the massive, painful difference between merely speaking the truth and actually serving the truth. A mature society would have to undergo literally the greatest cultural revolution in history just to learn how to carry honesty without resorting to cruelty. Because as it turns out, a person can tell the absolute, undeniable truth and still completely ruin someone's day, their reputation, or their entire confidence. Like it says right here, truth without empathy is just damage. So, what's the big takeaway here? The real nightmare, and perhaps the real miracle, of a world entirely without lies is having to answer this one unavoidable question. It wouldn't just be a world without falsehoods, it would be the ultimate pressure test for the human soul. So I'll leave you with this. If you could no longer hide behind a single polite fiction, are you actually ready to face yourself and everyone else exactly as you are?